You're probably wondering what JT is doing. Jumping through a window. But oftentimes you see superheroes jumping through windows when they have to save someone. So you're probably asking the question, man, I've tried so many different diets and nothing has worked for me despite eating healthy. If this is you, then you're gonna wanna stay till the end. Maybe you saw a documentary on Netflix and you decided, I'm going to go vegan or vegetarian because that's the healthiest thing to do. Or maybe you watched another Netflix documentary on fasting and you decided to go on a fasting marathon. But you realize that no matter how hard you try or what you do, you always default back to where you were before you started doing that thing. If this is you, as I mentioned earlier, please don't go anywhere because I'm going to give you a refreshing idea around dieting. I promise that this perspective will be very different and it will give you a different idea around changing once and for all. I wanna show you why you continue to struggle in the area of nutrition and how to change that forever. Before I go there, I wanna get into the details of dynamics, psychology, all those different things that are involved in change. But I wanna tell you a story, and I wanna tell you my story. My story is a story of redemption, but more importantly, initially it started off as a story of addiction. About 15 years ago, I was ensnared in this whole idea of addiction. And I couldn't understand why, because I was a disciplined guy. I owned the gym Monday through Friday. I was preaching health and nutrition and eating well and exercising, but on the weekends I was destroying my body because there were some things in my life that I was trying to fill the void. I was mitigating emotions with substances, and it got me in a lot of trouble. And I found myself one Monday morning sitting on the couch thinking how I was going to take myself out. I was in a really, really bad, dark place. And I realized that some changes had to be made. I shortly before that had a diagnosis of atrial fibrillation and a flutter in my heart based on my lifestyle, the substances, the things that I was doing to mitigate those emotions. And I felt pretty trapped. I was upset at myself because I knew I was disciplined. I could manage to do so many things. I ate properly, I exercised, I looked like the picture of fitness, but yet I was living a double life. And I didn't really know how I was gonna get myself out of this situation. I came to the conclusion that I was dependent, more importantly, addicted to substances. That was the beginning of my recovery process, being able to identify that I wasn't doing things simply out of fun or simply to follow the crowd, or because at the time I was justifying those dependencies, which were drugs, with the fact that, well, if they're prescription drugs, they can't be too bad, right? Because a doctor prescribes them. The problem, the main problem was those drugs weren't prescribed to me. I was using them in all the wrong ways. And so my first moment of clarity came when I realized that I was actually addicted. Now, why am I talking to you about addiction when I simply said that maybe you've gone on a bunch of different diet plans and nothing has worked for you? Because you're like, how does one thing have to do with the other? Let me explain. I operate out of the belief system that most people, I would say 99.9% of people, are addicted to food to one extent or the other. We're constantly mitigating emotions, we're looking for dopamine hits, and the safest place to do that is through food. And so at this point, maybe you've never considered this idea. And if you're part of that 99.9% of people that are addicted to food and you're mitigating emotions through food and you're in trouble, maybe you're 25, 50, 100 pounds overweight based on those mitigation tools that you have, you have basically leaned on, then you're gonna get a lot out of this video. I'm gonna give you 3 things that must happen if you wanna change forever in this area of nutrition, if you actually want to make nutrition sustainable. And what I wanna do is I wanna pair it synchronistically with my recovery from drugs, but instead we're gonna take it to the realm of food, because can I just say that any dependency needs to be broken in the same way. Number 1, abstinence, I believe, is a gift from God. The word abstinence simply says to keep away, to stay away from a certain thing for a period of time or forever. Now, here's the tricky thing between drugs and food. You don't need drugs to live. You need food to survive. And so food is something that you're gonna have to continue to navigate regardless of what happens and how long you abstain from certain foods that I'm gonna touch here on a second that I believe are keeping you addicted. you have to navigate this really well. Drugs, you could just stop doing. Obviously that's not easy, but you just simply say, I'm not doing this anymore, and then you never visit that again, and you can overcome it very easily by abstinence. Food, as I mentioned, you have to continue to bring in because it's part of your livelihood. So how do we deal with abstinence while we're basically getting away from this addiction of food? One of the things that's most addicting to the brain is sugar. And that usually comes in the form of starchy carbohydrates, which are high insulin yielding foods. These foods spike dopamine, that neuroreceptor that's associated with well-being. So anytime you feel stressed, you feel overwhelmed, there's friction in your life, we have a tendency to grab food. So the first thing we need to do in order to overcome the addiction to food is go into abstinence from these high insulin yielding foods. And until that happens, you're gonna continue on this cycle. So for example, if you go on a macro counting plan, great, you may hit a metric, but you'll always be addicted to the food because macro counting basically says that you can eat whatever you want as long as you meet your macros. The problem is, you're never resetting your palate, you're never resetting your brain's reward pathways, in other ways, the way your brain perceives reward. So what needs to happen is you need to go into abstinence from these foods for a certain amount of time, so then you can come back to them because we don't demonize food groups, and you're able to self-regulate without having that dependency and constantly needing or wanting the foods that are getting you in trouble as much as you're probably wanting them or needing them now. Number two, we need to replace empty calories with nutrient density. What do I mean by that? Empty calories have these big peaks and troughs in insulin. So when you eat the bag of chips, when you eat the snacks, the Kit Kat bars, the Snickers bars, all those things spike a bunch of insulin, and then you have a peak and a trough. And you're constantly hungry and you're constantly craving those things because it creates a perpetual effect of wanting. When you bring nutrient density into your diet, you stay satiated longer, you don't have the cravings, and even when you eat, you spike a little bit of insulin, but your insulin stays pretty balanced out, which is what we're looking for, and this is called homeostasis, a balance in your insulin levels. That, my friend, when you get there, is a game changer because you're not obsessing about food the entire day. Lastly, number three, I believe counseling has way more positive effects on changing a person's nutrition than working with a dietitian or a nutritionist. Now, I respect these professionals. I think there's a place and a time for these professionals, but I truly believe that 80% of the challenge that you're dealing with is not necessarily a challenge with dynamics. In other words, eat this, don't eat that. I don't think it's a knowledge gap that's keeping you stuck. I think actually what's keeping us stuck is the ideas that we have around food, right? And so being able to reframe ideas around people, places, things, weekends, holidays, and travel as you're changing your lifestyle is pivotal to your change. You can have the right guidelines, but if you don't have the right mindset, you're always going to be trapped and you're always going to default back to your old settings. So we need to change up here. 80 to 90% of the battle is in your mind, and this is why I say that counseling is way more efficient than actually working with a dietitian. Now, if you can find a plan that combines counseling with nutrition dynamics, with instilling powerful habits in your life that allow you to show up as a disciplined person, you have the right combination. I have good news for you, and this is a shameless plug. The Empty Your Bucket Nutrition Plan is exactly that, and it allows you to focus on the cognitive aspects of nutrition, which are 80 to 90%, and then dynamics that make things very sustainable because we're not demonizing foods, we're not counting macros, calories, or points, we're kicking out all the complexity, and we're giving you something sustainable that allows your disciplined muscle to rest. What a concept. That's right, discipline is a muscle and it does need rest. So when you have a program like this that takes all these things into consideration, you have a very powerful force that will allow you to move forward successfully and once and for all, get rid of the addictions to food, get rid of the fixation on food, and you can be free and actually enjoy food because guess what? That's what food was meant to be. I hope you enjoyed this video. More importantly, I hope to see you on the other side. Maybe you'll come on one of our programs. Go to the bio, check out the link there, schedule a free call. Let's chat and let's get this new part of your life, this new episode of your life going once and for all. Let's leave yo-yo dieting behind. And I promise you, my friend, that you are going to be a different person in just 90 days. My name is JT Tapias with the Empty Your Bucket Nutrition Plan. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.